Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy in the Israel-Hamas war? Check out this crazy clip with Charlie Kirk speaking at Cambridge University and debating a student. And this student goes unhinged, talking about, I don't know, you'll have to see for yourself. So let's watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
With the war in the Middle East, do you think it was a defensible decision to tell the Israelis you wanted Trump Gaza, to agree for Israel to invade the Gaza Strip, and to continue to murder thousands of innocent children and civilians in a pointless war? Is that in America's interest? Is that in humanity's interest?
Well, first of all, you should know something about Trump. There's something, if you realize with Trump over the last 10 years, he is quite the social media user and uses hyperbolic language at times. But let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil, but I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children.
Well, let's
it's a futile.
Let's zero in on.
There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing innocent populations, and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West's security.
You've made that point, but
well, it's not a point; it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish, I let you talk. Israel, at its holiest day of the calendar year besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded.
I'm no defender of the terrible pogrom that was launched against Jews on that day. But the justification for the death of innocents cannot be an infinite cycle of bloodlust. It cannot be killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians with a war with no end in sight, people who were not complicit in those atrocities. It cannot be bombing hospitals which children use. It cannot be bombing hospitals in which cancer patients are dying and starving in there. The deaths that have been inflicted, nobody knows the true toll, but somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people lie dead under the rubble. And what is left for Gaza except for to continue to suffer under Hamas? Because it turns out Netanyahu's political strategy has not worked. It has entrenched Hamas within the territories. To be a Christian, I would have thought, Mr. Kirk, would never have involved suggesting that the price for an atrocity must be an infinite cycle of bloodlust, that innocent people and the young population must be killed to avenge some kind of providential quest. How can you call yourself a Christian? Well, you just did.
I want to make sure we get our moral clarity straight before we proceed. No one likes what's happening in Gaza. No one with a heart or a soul or a mind likes when kids die. But you must understand who started the conflict so that you could end it correctly. And until Hamas brokers an unconditional surrender, of which they are unwilling to do, they could release the hostages and drop their weapons and their lives would be spared. Instead, they are using children of Gaza as cannon fodder, financed by the Iranian mullahs and dragging the entire world into this conflict. So I don't even know what we're debating at this point other than I believe that Israel, I believe the facts, Israel was unconditionally attacked on October 7th. They're responding in kind. And I would just ask you a very simple moral question. How should Israel have responded?
Not with the blanket carpet bombing of the city, not with bombing hospitals. Of course, some kind of military operation might have been necessary, but not murder on this scale. There is no justification for what is happening with the enormous death toll that is being produced. I really cannot see how you come here and you have the gall to lecture us on Christian morality and then sit here and justify the murder of thousands of civilians. And is it working, Mr. Kirk? Is Hamas dismantled?
I've never said that.
You just did.
Well, no,
this is your whole
in
thing.
war, these are called casualties of a war.
We're going to need to stop bringing this
Again,
to close.
I'm not going to justify every military maneuver of a 100,000 person army. Instead, what I will do is I'll be clear that there is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Isn't that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on. It's interesting you say that, because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is bad, has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
I honestly don't know how Charlie Kirk has the patience with these people time and time again, day after day. But let's talk about some of the things that were brought up in this conversation. First of all, the word genocide. It is so played out, it is so overused these days that it becomes essentially meaningless. Genocide, it has an actual meaning to it. If Israel is committing a genocide, then how does one explain the nearly doubling in population over the past 25 years? In the year 2000, there were 1 million people living in Gaza. Today, there are 2.3 million people living in Gaza. How does one explain that? Genocide doesn't double a population. Genocide erases a population. So words matter, okay? And weaponizing them, it dilutes actual atrocities. The other thing that's brought up is this sort of selective outrage syndrome, where there's an over amount of outrage when it comes to what's going on in Gaza. And people don't have any sort of real commentary or passion when it comes to other issues going on around the world. In fact, worse atrocities and real genocides. And so this student seems to be somewhat knowledgeable, at least in knowing that there are other things and what's going on in Sudan and Myanmar. But where's the outrage in general from people that are claiming genocide and are so worked up over what's going on in Gaza? Where's the outrage of what's going on with the Uyghur Muslims in China, for example? Where's the outrage of the mass executions that are happening in Iran? Why are people obsessed with the one state that happens to be the state that calls itself the Jewish state when it's defending itself from rocket attacks and terror tunnels? You don't have to be Jewish to notice the double standards that are going on over here. You just have to be honest. Another thing that comes up from these sorts of conversations is that every country has the ability to defend itself except for Israel. Hamas is hiding weapons in schools and in hospitals and then cries foul when there's a civilian hurt. It's not a war crime to defend oneself against rockets. It's a crime, it is a war crime, to launch them from playgrounds. Okay, why is Israel held to a moral standard that no other country on earth would ever be held to? Furthermore, there is no occupation in Gaza. Israel withdrew its forces unilaterally, every soldier, every settler from Gaza in 2005. No checkpoints, no presence, no occupation. What did Hamas do with that freedom that it was granted in 2005? They built terror tunnels instead of building schools. They used concretes for rockets instead of roads. And so who's the bad guy over here? Additionally, Israel doesn't target civilians, but Hamas targets Jews. There's a difference between tragedy and terrorism. When civilians die in Gaza, that is a tragedy, a big tragedy. But it's not the goal of the IDF to kill civilians. When civilians die in Israel, it's Hamas's mission accomplished. They're doing exactly what they set out to do. The moral distinction between the two parties matters over here. We have to be able to have moral clarity when it comes to this situation and all situations. It's not hard to tell in this situation who's on the side of life and who is on the side of death. One side uses missiles to protect its children. The other side uses its children to protect its missiles. If you can't tell the difference, the problem isn't Israel, it's your moral compass. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.